Congratulations on the award. What was your reaction considering all that you've done this year?
I was actually completely surprised. I would never in a million years think that I would get an award from USRowing, to be very honest.
You were standing on the banks of the Charles River and you saw the head of the Charles and knew you wanted to do it. Why?
You know, I think it was just so beautiful, and it was so different, kind of otherworldly from what my life was like. You know, I grew up here in New York City, and I did sports a little. I went to all-girls schools, but it wasn't anything I was really focused on. I was really focused on trying to do well academically. That was what mattered in my family. And I was in boarding school in Boston and escaped for a day. A friend of mine had a friend at Princeton who was a coxswain, and he said, come see the race. I'm like, what is this? What is a regatta? So I came, and I think I was just so kind of unhappy with my life the way it was. You know, a lot of teenagers are not quite sure about what's going on in their lives. And I'd had enough going on in my family background that I really wanted kind of a new life. And I think I looked at the river and saw these oars and these boats, everything looking so perfectly synchronized, you know, the benefit of distance, right, and of ignorance. You think everything looks perfect when you look at a rowing show. It doesn't really happen anymore. But I think I was just mesmerized, and I wanted into that world. Even though I saw no women on the river that day. It was 1974. I still thought maybe one day I could do it.
And you did, and it became a life changer for you. What was it about rowing that helped you through all of the difficulties of your past? I mean, why was rowing such a game changer?
Well, I think there were a few things. Some of it was about rowing, and some of it was not about rowing. I started at Yale in the fall of 1975. It was only about a third women. I was very used to kind of being in an all-female environment since I'd gone to all-girls school since 4th grade. And one of the things that attracted me to rowing, once I kind of found out about it, was being part of a group of very strong women. I didn't necessarily know what it meant to be part of a team, but as I got more and more into it, that aspect was very compelling. You really didn't have to be a nice person. All you had to do was work really hard. So you weren't going to get kicked out if they didn't like you. You might get kicked out if your ERG scores were bad, but that I could kind of deal with. So there was that piece that I really, that I think really called to me, and the idea of doing something for other people. When I was first racing, it was very hard for me to believe that I would necessarily deserve to win a medal, but I could always look at the people in front of me and think, oh, Kathy deserves to win. I know how hard she's worked. So I loved that. I loved being part of a group of women. And of course, Yale at that era had, I mean, the women rowers at Yale were incredibly feisty, starting with Chris Ernst and then Ann Warner, and it was just an amazing group of women to be part of. And I loved that. And then there was just, I think the other part of rowing that I really loved was how hard you could work. And you could always be testing yourself. And I loved that aspect of it. I think I really needed a way to prove to myself that I was going to be strong enough, kind of able to handle whatever vicissitudes life was going to bring me. And I think at that point I wasn't very sure that I would be able to.
You had a chance this year to look back and put it all on paper. What has that experience been like, writing course correction?
Oh, it was great. Writing is actually kind of like rowing. There's the same, you really have to bring the same discipline. One of the things I learned after I graduated from Yale, one of the great things about rowing at Yale was that you didn't have to wake up early in the morning to row. So I got to row for my first 4 or 5 years, rowing, getting on the bus at 3:45. I learned when I moved to Boston and started training on my own that when the alarm went off, I did not think. I just got up out of bed and got ready to go to the boathouse. And I would not let myself think until I got on the water. No questions asked. I wasn't going to worry about why I was doing this, whether it was important, whether my reasons were good. Just get up and go. And writing is very similar. Don't give yourself any excuses to wonder whether you should be doing this. Just get up and go. And there, of course, as soon as I sit down, when I start writing, I have to be thinking. But there was a lot of that aspect that reminded me of rowing. And then just getting to remember how much I loved rowing and getting to put that down and thinking about all the lessons I had learned on in rowing was very meaningful. And then thinking through what I hadn't learned in rowing that I had to learn later on in life. I mean, rowing, unfortunately, can't teach you everything, but it can teach you an awful lot.
If you were talking to a teenager who was thinking about getting into this and hadn't read course correction, What would you say?
About why they should row? Oh, I think rowing is an amazing sport, especially for young people, especially teenagers, because you become part of a community that is so focused on having a good time, but in a context of self improvement, if you will, and making something beautiful happen. I mean, I think that sounds really corny, but everybody knows that a well rowed shell is just incredible to look at. In fact, the biggest compliment I ever got was from Ernestine Bear, who told me I made rowing look easy in a single. And really, I will always treasure that. That's kind of the goal. And I think for young people to get to do something together, have fun with each other, and then test themselves, right? There's a lot of self testing and growth available through the sport of rowing. That's perfect for teenagers.